Imagine this. You've just given birth to your fourth child. A few weeks later, you feel a strange knot deep in your belly. Concerned, you go to the doctor. He tells you it's a tumor. During treatment, he removes 2 small pieces of tissue from your cervix, one to test the tumor, the other for research. Research you never agreed to, research you had no idea of. They tell you the cells are cancerous, but what they didn't tell you is that those same cells will become the first immortal human cell line in history. Cells that will go on to change science, revolutionize medicine, and save countless lives. Let me tell you the story of Henrietta Lacks. But before we dive into the details, welcome to my Hidden Chapters of Black History series, where I'll be breaking down the stories they never taught us in school. Make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit your notification bell so you never miss a new chapter. Henrietta Lacks was born on August 1st, 1920 in Roanoke, Virginia, one of 10 children to parents Johnny Pleasant and Eliza Lacks Pleasant. At birth, Henrietta was actually named Loretta Pleasant, but somewhere along the way, her name began showing up as Henrietta. Nobody really knows how or why her name changed. Some speculate it was a clerical mistake, a misheard name, or even a nickname that just stuck. Over time, Henrietta became the name everyone knew her by. When she was just 4 years old, tragedy struck. Sadly, Henrietta's mother died during childbirth, delivering her 10th baby. Her father, Johnny Lacks, couldn't care for all 10 children on his own, so the siblings were split amongst relatives. Henrietta was sent to Clover, Virginia, to live with her grandfather, Tommy Lacks, in a log cabin the family called Home House. And here's something you may not know. That same cabin used to house her enslaved ancestors. They worked the tobacco fields, raised their families, and lived generation after generation on that land. After emancipation, her family stayed, and over time, they slowly bought the land back. So many Lacks relatives eventually settled there that the area became known as Lackstown. That's where she grew up, surrounded by cousins working the same tobacco fields their ancestors did. And in those fields, she grew close to someone she'd known all her life, her cousin David Day Lacks. They played together as kids, worked the land side by side, and over time, that bond turned into something more. They fell in love. Now, even though they were related, in small, tight-knit communities like Clover, where families stayed close and folks mostly married who they knew, cousin relationships or cousin marriages wasn't all that uncommon at that time. Henrietta and Day got married, and the two of them moved to Turner Station, a Black working-class community in Baltimore, Maryland, looking for better opportunities. But the city life wasn't really Henny's thing. Whenever she could, Henrietta would head back to Clover, to Home House. She'd churn butter, cook with her cousins, and just enjoy being back on familiar land. That was her peace. By her early 30s, Henrietta had 5 children and a steady, simple life. But something was happening inside her body, and she could feel it. For more than a year, Henrietta had been telling her close friends that something didn't feel right. One night, she told her cousins Sadie and Margaret about it. She said she had a knot inside her, that it felt awful, especially when her husband Dave wanted to be intimate. At first, she thought it was just lingering pain from giving birth to her baby girl Deborah a few weeks earlier. Or maybe, she said, it was that bad blood that David sometimes brought home after being with other women. Back then, folks said bad blood instead of saying STD. Her cousins encouraged her to go get it checked out, just in case it's something bad. But Henrietta didn't go to the doctor, and her cousins didn't tell nobody. Sadie later said she believed Henrietta kept it to herself out of fear. Fear that if she went to the hospital, they'd take her womb, and she wouldn't be able to have any more children. And back then, Black folks had every reason to be apprehensive of the hospital. Racism, prejudice, and neglect were common, and doctors didn't always treat us with care or respect. Plus, Black folks didn't trust hospitals or doctors like that anyway. Let's not forget all those rumors in Baltimore. Stories of people going in the hospital and not coming out. Rumors about Black folks getting snatched up and experimented on.
Well, everybody knows that Johns Hopkins, when we was growing up, they would say, don't sit on the front steps past dark because Johns Hopkins will snatch you up and do research on you.
True or not, it was just another reason for Henny to keep that knot to herself. Not long after that conversation with her cousins, Henrietta got pregnant again, this time with her 5th child, Joseph, who they lovingly called Joe. But just a few months after Joe was born, she started noticing something strange. Spotting in her underwear. And it wasn't her time of the month. That's when she decided to do a self-exam. She ran herself a bath, got in, leaned back, and that's when she felt it. A hard lump on her cervix. Something was there, and this time it was undeniable. Henrietta got out the tub, dried off, and told her husband, "You better take me to the doctor. I'm bleeding, and it ain't my time." So Henrietta, Day, and 3 of their 5 children piled into their old Buick and headed to Johns Hopkins. Back in 1951, Johns Hopkins was the only hospital in Baltimore that would even treat Black patients. But Henrietta wasn't seen in the same rooms or hallways as white patients. The hospital was still segregated. She was taken to what they called back then the colored ward, a separate wing for Black patients. That's where she met Dr. Howard Jones, the physician who examined her. When Dr. Jones went over Henrietta's medical records, it showed that she had been living with a multitude of untreated conditions, including neurosyphilis, gonorrhea, and increased cellular activity of the cervix. When called back to the clinic for treatment, Henrietta did not respond. It wasn't a shock that Henrietta didn't go back to Hopkins for follow-ups. For her, stepping into that hospital felt like being dropped into a whole nother world where she didn't even speak the language. She knew how to work the tobacco fields and how to butcher a pig, but she never even heard the words cervix or biopsy. She didn't read or write much, and science wasn't something she learned in school. Like most Black patients at the time, she only went to Hopkins when she truly felt she had no other option. Henrietta told Dr. Jones about the pain and the spotting and how there was something wrong with the neck of her womb. Dr. Jones really didn't know what she meant by that, so he began to examine her himself. And what he found shocked him. Sure enough, there was a lump, which he described as an eroded hard mass the size of a nickel. He'd seen nothing like it before. He said it was shiny and purple like grape jello, and so delicate that it bled at the slightest touch. He took a small piece of the mass to send it to pathology for testing, and he sent Henrietta home. When the results came back from the biopsy, the diagnosis was clear. Henrietta had epidermoid carcinoma of the cervix, stage 1. Dr. Jones called Henrietta and told her that the mass was malignant. Henrietta didn't tell anyone what the doctor said at the time, and she just went on with her day as usual. She kept it to herself because she didn't want to upset anyone. As a matter of fact, she downplayed her diagnosis, telling her husband and her children not to worry, that it was nothing serious, and that the doctors are going to fix her right up. Henrietta started treatment at Johns Hopkins not long after her diagnosis. For this treatment, they used radium therapy, the most aggressive method they had for cervical cancer at the time. Doctors would insert long rods of radioactive material directly into the cervix, then stitch them in place. As they prepped her for the procedure, Henrietta lay unconscious beneath the cold surgical lights, feet in stirrups, completely vulnerable. The surgeon on duty that day, Dr. Lawrence Wharton Jr., peered inside her cervix, and before he began any real steps in treating Henny, he did something else, something sinister. He cut 2 pieces of her cervix, one from the tumor and one from healthy tissue. Not because it was necessary for her treatment, not because it would help her heal, and not because it was a part of hospital protocol, but for research. Research she never consented to, an experiment she never had knowledge of. She never gave consent. She never even agreed to be a donor. She simply put her trust in these doctors, unaware of what was happening to her body while she lay unconscious. Those 2 samples were placed into a glass dish and sent to a man named George Guy, a cell biologist and head of the tissue culture lab at Johns Hopkins. After that first treatment, Henrietta went right back to life as usual. Radium is known to cause brutal side effects like burning, bleeding, nausea, fatigue, even permanent tissue damage. But if Henny felt any of it, she never said a word. Not to the doctors, not to the nurses, not even to her family. She just kept smiling, came home, raised her babies, made dinner, and lived her life. And for a while, it was easy to keep the cancer to herself, especially since she only had to return to Hopkins once more for a checkup and her second round of radium. And at first, the doctors thought it was working. The tumor seemed to shrink. But then came the X-ray treatments, and the visits, they became more frequent. Eventually, she had to tell her cousins the truth. She had cancer. Towards the end of her treatments, Henrietta asked the doctor when she'd be better so she can try for another baby. But she was never told that the treatments had made her infertile. Doctors later admitted that they believed if she knew, she might not have gone through with treatments. Just weeks later, Henrietta started experiencing a new kind of pain, deeper, stronger, unrelenting. She told her cousins, "I feel like there's blackness spreading all inside me." Her cousin said he never forgot those words, and soon after, the blackness showed itself. Henrietta's stomach turned black as coal. Her skin began to bruise and swell from the inside. The pain was unbearable. When doctors examined her again, they realized the truth. The cancer had spread everywhere. It was in her kidneys, bladder, urethra, uterus, lungs, bones, even her heart. Her body was full of tumors. And nothing helped the pain, not even morphine. In a desperate attempt to ease her pain, doctors injected alcohol directly into her spine. Still nothing. Henrietta was suffering, and she knew she was dying. During her final days, she could barely move. She was just 31 years old. Her children were still babies. Her body was shutting down. And as she lay on her deathbed, she gave her cousin one final request. "Don't let nothing bad happen to them children when I'm gone." That was her last plea. Even through the pain, her thoughts were on her babies. Henrietta Lacks passed away on October 4th, 1951. She was just 31 years old. Now, just a minor discrepancy. I'm looking at this death certificate and I see that they have her birthday as August 18th, 1920, but her family says that her birthday is August 1st, 1920, and that's when they've always celebrated it. That's just another discrepancy in Henrietta's story. She was buried in an unmarked grave in the Lacks family cemetery behind her childhood home in Clover, Virginia, leaving behind 5 small children, a husband, and a family full of grief. She was gone, but something she left behind was miraculously still living. At Johns Hopkins Hospital, in a lab just a few floors from where Henrietta was being treated, a revolution was quietly taking shape. A lab assistant named Mary Kubesic was the one who noticed it first. She had placed a sample of Henrietta's tumor cells into a petri dish, just like they'd done with countless other patients before. But this time, something was different. The cells didn't die off like they usually did. They started multiplying, and fast. 1 cell became 2, 2 became 4, and they just kept going. When Dr. George Guy, the head of tissue culture research at Johns Hopkins, saw what was happening, he knew right away that this was big. He had spent years trying to grow human cells outside the body. Decades. Nothing ever worked until now. Henrietta's cells were the first that could survive outside the human body and keep growing on their own. They were strong, aggressive, and didn't slow down. They became the first immortal human cell line in history. Dr. Guy named them HeLa, after the first two letters of Henrietta's first and last name. And once he realized what he had, he didn't keep it to himself. He started sending HeLa cells to scientists across the country and eventually around the world. To universities, research labs, pharmaceutical companies, anyone studying cancer, genetics, vaccines, you name it. This was the breakthrough scientists had been chasing for decades. But that raises a real question. If her cells were so powerful, why didn't they save her? Henrietta's cancer was fast, aggressive, and hard to control. The same thing that made her cells so groundbreaking in science was the same thing that destroyed her body. Her cervical cancer was caused by HPV, a virus that triggered an enzyme in her cells called telomerase. That enzyme stops cells from dying when they're supposed to. So instead of breaking down like normal, her cells kept dividing nonstop. That's why her cancer grew so fast, and why even the strongest treatments at the time, radium and x-rays, weren't enough. Yes, her cells became what science now calls immortal, but they were still cancer cells. In a lab dish, scientists can control them, study them, and use them to help others. But inside her body, they were a disease. Meanwhile, those same cells are making history. For decades, HeLa cells were used in some of the biggest medical breakthroughs in the world. HeLa cells helped develop the polio vaccine, paved the way for cancer research, and advanced our understanding of radiation and toxic exposure. They've been used to study HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, herpes, Zika, COVID-19, and even Parkinson's disease. HeLa cells made it possible to test the effects of chemotherapy, gene mapping, and they even helped unlock breakthroughs in in-vitro fertilization. They've been contributed to cloning, stem cell research, HPV vaccines, and help researchers better understand how viruses and human cells interact. And guess what? HeLa cells were even sent to space. NASA used them to study how human cells respond to zero gravity and cosmic radiation. All of this from a woman who never knew her cells were even taken. And you guys, here's the irony. Henrietta died from cervical cancer caused by HPV, and yet her very cells were later used to study the virus and help develop the HPV vaccine. The same vaccine is now protecting millions of people around the world from the exact kind of cancer that took her life. At the risk of sounding like I'm repeating myself, I just want us all to really sit with this for a moment and understand the magnitude of what HeLa cells actually are. These wasn't just some cells in a dish. HeLa became a cornerstone of scientific research because of their unique ability to reproduce indefinitely in a lab setting, all while this Black woman knew nothing about it. Doctors, scientists, and pharmaceutical companies went on to profit millions, maybe even billions from her cells. Meanwhile, her family lived in poverty, no recognition, no compensation, not for decades.
Think about the fact that these pharmaceutical companies are making all these trillions of dollars off of the HeLa cell. And I mean, they can say back then things were different and the statute of limitation, but I think my grandmother and her cells played a significant part in everybody's life in here, because we were told by scientists that the medicines that they use, even down to your dogs, the medicines that they make for your animal, scientists that's like the gold cell that they start with in any and everything that they use.
And speaking of doctors profiting millions, tell me why the man often credited with pioneering IVF in the U.S., Dr. Howard Jones, was the same doctor who treated Henrietta at Johns Hopkins. Now, isn't that something? The doctor who took her cells without asking went on to pioneer in vitro fertilization, a medical breakthrough that helped thousands of families bring life into the world, all while Henrietta, a young Black mother, had no idea her own body made it possible. And one of the most egregious and heartbreaking parts of this story is, like I said, her family had no idea. Her family also lived in poverty. They received no recognition, no compensation, and not for decades. In fact, her family had to fight just to be heard. Then one day in the 1970s, the phone started ringing. Researchers were calling Henrietta's children, asking them to come in for blood tests, but they didn't explain why. They didn't break anything down, and it wasn't to help the kids or the family at all. They were trying to map Henrietta's DNA to better control the HeLa cell line. They were experimenting, using her children to study her cells. They weren't getting calls to visit labs, speak at conferences, or be congratulated for what their mother had contributed to science. They were treated like test subjects. Nobody sat the family down and said, "Hey, your mother changed the world." No one explained. Instead, they used medical terminology they knew the family wouldn't understand. Her daughter Deborah once said, "We didn't know what a cell was. We thought they were talking about parts of our mother's body still living." That's how little they had been told. Her kids were left confused, and here's the part that cuts really deep. While Henrietta's cells were helping to build multi-million-dollar pharmaceutical companies, her own family was living in poverty. They didn't have health insurance. They couldn't afford regular doctor's visits. Some of her children even suffered from medical conditions that went untreated because they simply didn't have access to care. The woman who helped make modern medicine possible, her descendants couldn't even benefit from the very system she helped create. One pharmaceutical company alone made millions off the distribution of HeLa cells. And the family, they didn't even receive a single dollar, not even a phone call. But through it all, her family never gave up. They kept asking, kept pushing, kept demanding that Henrietta's name be known and that her story be honored. And at the heart of that fight was her baby girl, Deborah Lacks. She was determined, focused, protective of her mother's legacy. She wanted answers and she wanted the truth. Deborah is quoted saying, "All I want is for my mother's name to be remembered." That's all she ever wanted, to be loved, to have her children and to be remembered. She teamed up with journalist Rebecca Skloot, and together they uncovered the full story. In 2010, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks was released. The book became a bestseller, and for the first time, people began to see HeLa for who she really was. Not just cells in a lab, but a Black woman with a name, a story, and a family. Henrietta's story sparked national conversations around medical ethics, consent, and the mistreatment of Black patients in healthcare. People were asking questions about ethics and consent, and how something so personal could be taken without the family's knowledge. That same year, Henrietta finally received a proper headstone. For nearly 60 years, Henrietta had been buried in an unmarked grave in a Lacks family cemetery. But with all the growing awareness of her story, supporters came together to honor her memory the right way. As public pressure grew, change followed. In 2013, the National Institutes of Health, NIH, made an agreement with the Lacks family. Moving forward, scientists would need permission from the family before accessing Henrietta's full genome. It wasn't compensation, but it was a step towards dignity, recognition, and transparency. In 2017, HBO released a film adaptation of the book, produced by and starring Oprah Winfrey as Deborah Lacks. In 2021, the World Health Organization, WHO, honored Henrietta Lacks with an award, recognizing the global impact of her cells and her extraordinary contribution to medicine.
Many thought to hide or alter things about her: her race, her name, her identity. That's why today I have invited you, her family, to WHO, so you can share your family story in your own words. What happened to Henrietta was wrong for at least 3 reasons. First, she lived in a time when racial discrimination was legal in her society. Racial discrimination may no longer be legal in most countries, but it's still widespread in many countries. Second, Henrietta Lacks was exploited. She is one of many women of color whose bodies has been misused by science. She placed her trust in the health system so she could receive treatment. But the system took something from her without her knowledge or consent. And third, The medical technologies that were developed from this injustice have been used to perpetuate further injustice because they have not been shared equitably around the world. Henrietta's cells were foundational in the development of HPV vaccines that can eliminate the same cancer that took her life. Many people have benefited from those cells. Fortunes have been made. Science has advanced. Nobel Prizes have been won, and most importantly, many lives have been saved. No doubt, Henrietta would have been pleased that her suffering has saved others. But the end doesn't justify the means. All it would have taken was for someone to do her the honor of asking. In honoring Henrietta Lacks today, WHO acknowledged the importance of reckoning with past injustices and advancing racial equity in health and science. Acknowledging the wrongs of the past is essential for building trust for the future. Today is also an opportunity to recognize those women of color who have made incredible but often unseen contributions to medical science. It's therefore my great honor to present the Director General's Award posthumously to Henrietta Lacks. I invite her son, Mr. Lawrence Lacks, and her great-granddaughter, Victoria Baptiste, to receive it on her behalf. Okay.
I am Lawrence Lacks, senior of Henrietta Lacks' son. I want to thank everybody and everything for the award that you ever gave her. And it's very beautiful. And I want to thank you and thank you again. There's no words to say how much this means to me. Thank everybody.
Now I'm going to go off of my script real quick so I can just tell you guys how I feel really quick. But watching the World Health Organization honoring Henrietta Lacks' family, and to see Henrietta Lacks' son and her descendants, you know, her grandkids also, it really just moved me to tears. It moved me so bad because Henrietta said to her cousin, you know, one of the last things that she said on her deathbed was, "Don't let nothing happen to them kids when I'm gone." And to see how long her son has lived, and to see her son being able to be here and honor her in this way, it just blows me away. It blows me away to see her family. And I might be a little bit emotional because I also have a best friend, my best friend, who passed away some years ago of cervical cancer. And she was only 32 years old. And she left behind 3 small children as well. But just being able to see Deborah Lacks' son, you know, and her descendants, and they still here, and they're still fighting for their mother's legacy. And also what really got me emotional and what really kind of hit me too is her great-granddaughter, who is now an RN. You know, she's a nurse, she's a healer. She's continuing the very legacy her great-grandmother unknowingly began. And that really just gave me chills, like to see this Black woman generations later standing tall in the medical field that once took so much from her family, now using that space to advocate for humanity, to care for people and to change lives. I literally am speechless right now. I have no words.
We'll now hear from Miss Victoria Baptiste, the great-granddaughter of Henrietta Lacks.
Being here today, we are humbled to receive this historic recognition of my great-grandmother, Henrietta Lacks. honoring who she was as a remarkable woman and the lasting impact of her HeLa cells. Henrietta's contributions, once hidden, are now being rightfully honored for their global impact. On behalf of my family, I would like to thank Dr. Tedros, Dr. Nono, Dr. Parham, and Dr. Sumia Swaminathan, and the World Health Organization for recognizing all the good my grandfather's mother has done for the world. Acknowledging the invaluable contributions a Black woman from the tobacco fields of Clover, Virginia, has contributed to science, medicine, the arts, and beyond. She was a pioneer in life, giving back to her community, helping family and friends live a better life, and caring for others. In death, she continues to help the world. Through HeLa 100, the Henrietta Lacks Initiative, we educate future generations on the impact of my great-grandmother's HeLa cells. While just like our friends we are here with today at the WHO, we also seek to advance health equity and social justice. My family stands in solidarity with WHO and our sisters around the world to ensure that no other wife, mother, or sister dies needlessly from cervical cancer. As a registered nurse, I am proud to also be here today to honor my great-grandmother's legacy by advocating to ensure equitable access to the breakthroughs that her HeLa cells have advanced, such as HPV and COVID-19 vaccines. It is only fitting that as we commemorate the 70th anniversary of Henrietta Lacks' HeLa cells and her untimely passing, we build upon her legacy by ensuring equitable access to advances in cancer prevention and treatment for all people. We're reclaiming her name and our story. Her legacy lives on in us. And we thank you for saying her name, Henrietta Lacks.
Although Henrietta had been honored in recent years with awards, speeches, statues, and global recognition, her family was still seeking justice behind the scenes. In 2021, they filed a lawsuit against Thermo Fisher Scientific, one of the many companies that had continued to profit from HeLa cells. And in 2023, they reached a confidential settlement.
This is such a significant occurrence in the course of human history.
70 years after her cells helped to usher in the era of modern medicine, Henrietta Lacks is finally getting justice. Her family announcing a landmark settlement with biotech giant Thermo Fisher, alleging the company has been commercializing and profiting from innovations related to cells taken without her consent back in 1951.
Henrietta Lacks changed the world in ways she never could have imagined. Her cells help unlock some of the biggest medical breakthroughs of our time, revolutionizing science, saving lives, and advancing medicine across the globe. And yet, she was just this young Black woman who loved to cook, loved to dance, loved her family, and had a smile that can light up any room. So to Henrietta Lacks, thank you. You changed the world and didn't even know it. May you rest in power for your undeniable contribution to science and humanity. And to her family and descendants, thank you for continuing the fight, for speaking her name, for making sure the world knows exactly who HeLa was.